Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Poetry of Painting, a show about poetry and painting. It's all there in the name. So we like to have some poetry read for you by a guest poet, and that's normally about one of my paintings, just in case you haven't seen the show before. And this week, I've got the great pleasure of welcoming back to the show Reese North, all the way from Australia. So let me bring Reese on. Hi, Reese. How are you?
G'day, how are you? Yeah, fine.
Good. Keeping well?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for getting up at some ridiculous hour in Australia there to be live on the show. Lovely to
Yeah,
have
that's
you
right.
live with us. And I
Oh,
know
thank you.
Lish did as well when she was on recently. I
Mm.
mean, that is dedication, I have to say. True dedication. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky
Ah,
I'm awake at this hour fairly regularly.
yeah. Well, I'm sometimes awake at an equivalent in the UK, but only briefly, and I go back to sleep again. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
no. Oh,
I'll doze after this.
sorry. Chris says, hello, both. Nice to be with you again. Thanks very much, Chris. Lovely to have you with us. And
Hi,
welcome to
Chris.
everybody else who's watching as well, either live or on replay, of course. So thanks for joining in the show. Do make comments and ask questions if you'd like to. We like to have people involved and contributing. So Reese, this week, you've done me the honour of writing another poem about yet another of my paintings. And I'll just bring that onto the screen, hopefully. Yes, it's worked this time. It was playing up last time, but there we go. We have it on the screen. People can see it a bit better. And this one is called Autumn Calm. And I think that's all you knew about it when you wrote your poem, Reese. So if you'd like to tell us about what it meant to you and read us your poem, that would be brilliant.
Yeah. Well, it just seemed like such an incredibly peaceful place, so far away from everything, as a lot of your poems, your paintings, sorry, suggest to me. And it sort of had almost a utopian effect on me, like it was just a perfect place to be. And then it made me think of Shangri-La,
Okay.
which is a magical place where everything's like calm and the world's humans living together have all sorted their problems out and they live. I think they live forever. If you live within that specific area, it's like a heaven on earth. So
Yeah.
I use that as a way of entering it. In fact, I called my poem Shangri-La, inspired by Fiona Hooper's painting Autumn Calm. And I just imagined I gave it, like in the first stanza, it's pretty much a straightforward description of the painting, and then I dream my way through the rest of it, and just imagine what it would have been like if it was like a bird flying over it and flying through the scene.
Yeah.
And and I just took it that way. And then that distant mountain intrigued me. I felt there was like maybe at the base there was a forest, and which would be full of creatures living there, birds in particular. And and I imagine it was more like a brightly moonlit night, which was the moon was so strong, almost like a supermoon that was made it like day. Yeah,
Yeah. Ah.
yeah. So I took it that
I,
way.
I just love hearing how other people see the paintings, whether that's,
Mm.
poets like yourself or just anybody who's, if I get chatting with them and they're looking at some of my paintings, it's just so amazing to hear how it affects different people in different ways. So yeah,
Yeah.
oh, it's great. That
Uh,
sounds lovely.
I think I've said it before. I like the term my Rorschach eyes. You know what a Rorschach test is, like
Mm,
an ink blot. Yeah.
yeah,
So I open my imagination up that way. I try to imagine it like it is something like an ink blot, and what do I actually see in there as well? So it opens out my imagination. Yeah,
yeah. Chris
yeah.
Chris says interesting perspective as well, Reese. So
Mm,
yes, I love hearing about how you think about the painting and what it means to you and how you develop your poem from it, because it's just intriguing to me. So
yeah, it is amazing how images can be translated into words. You know, like, and what comes first, the image or the words? I think we articulate after what we see. There is one culture, they're called the Afar people in Africa, who say one of the sayings amongst the wise people who teach the young, they say, your eyes are the present, your ears are your father's. Your eyes are seeing now, your ears are speaking of the past. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, because we tend to hear the history in things like, ghosts. I think ghosts are more a sense of, often there's hearing involved in the sensing of the past like that, whereas seeing is very direct sense. Whereas hearing is, you get the sounds of time echoing through things. I think we pick that up through our ears more. Yeah. So, and they work together, of course, all the senses. So it's an overlapping of senses comes into it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Absolutely.
That's my theory anyway.
And why not? I don't think anybody probably actually knows or could prove that that's wrong or right. So, and it could also, of course, be different for different people.
Of course, yeah.
So, yeah.
Just
So
the way
would you
I
like?
feel.
Sorry.
It's the way I feel things. That's more what I'm speaking about. I don't mean to set that as a standard way of seeing. It's just my way of seeing. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So would you like to read us your poem now, Reese?
Definitely. Yeah. Sure. I'll just put it in front of me here, so it's easily heard. My voice is coming through. Okay.
It is coming through perfectly. Thank you.
Good. Okay. All right. Shangri-La, inspired by Fiona Hooper's painting Autumn Calm. Wanderers speak of a place as still as peace, hidden in a wilderness, surrounded by mountains, where a calm autumn lake is fed by a river. Brown mixed with green colours the grass of wetlands and flatlands that arose from dark earth. In a dream I flew across the mirror lake, lit by a moon as bright as day. Along the shoreline, the croaking of frogs mixed with the sound of mud bubbles bursting. The moon illumined my way, and from a forest below, a nightingale's song filled the air with its music, and the warm eyes of birds rose from the trees. For a moment I floated on a breeze of enchantment, when my heart filled with love for this timeless world.
Beautiful.
That's it.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Reese. I love that. I love the imagery that you get in there with the frogs and the bubbling mud and the birds and everything. It's just, it sets, you've set the scene with initially, and then you're just adding the little bits, the little touches that make it complete, which is lovely.
Yeah.
So this one,
sorry.
No, carry on.
I like to feel the things that aren't expressed in the painting as well, but they're suggested as being there just by the scenery.
Yes, yeah. Well, Chris says, great poem, some great descriptive language. Absolutely, Chris. Definitely agree with you on that one. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
So this scene is actually taken from a spot in the Lake District in Cumbria in the UK. And it's of Wastwater, which is one of our lakes up there. And it is such a beautiful place, especially if you go there when there's not many people about. It's just so peaceful, so quiet. You can walk over most of those mountains, just beautiful. But like anywhere, the weather can change fairly quickly when you're walking on mountains. So, it's best to be prepared. But it's just such a lovely place up there. It's so peaceful. You can really just go and unwind, chill out, and appreciate being out in nature, with I think water helps with that as well, but just the the peace and quiet, and just you're in that protected little valley, basically. Well, it's quite a big valley actually for Wastwater, but you're protected down there. You've got the mountains looking after you on all sides, and yeah, it's a lovely place. Must go back.
Yeah.
Must go back again.
It feels like a safe place, like a haven. Yeah.
Yes.
From the larger world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And a world that's not in the best of conditions in many ways at the moment, but I don't want to depress anybody, but to be able to look at somewhere like this is just so calming. And Chris says, Wastwater is the deepest of the lakes, a very brooding place.
Wow.
That's another interesting perspective on it.
Yeah. It's very interesting, actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
how
some
deep
of them,
it is. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Chris might be able to tell us in a minute, but I think they're glacial, so they are, really quite deep in places, I believe.
Wow.
And I know some of them, I'm not sure about Wastwater, but I know some of them are actually also very cold as well. The water in them doesn't normally get very warm, even at the end of a summer. I think they're quite cold. And of course, they've been used for, speed records on water. Bluebird sadly ended in tragedy. But there've been so many things on the lakes. They often have people swimming and doing races in them as well. I think Coniston might be one they use for that, which I think is quite another cold one as well. But yeah, it's such a lovely place to hike around, and you come up over a mountain and up over the top, and there's this fantastic lake spread out before you, and there's also some rather nice little pubs and things around to go in and have a drink at the end of the day, or some lunch or something, so so if you haven't been, it's a wonderful place to visit if you're over here. Chris has come up done us proud again. Wastwater's around 240 feet deep at its deepest point, and it is very cold. And he knows because he's been in it.
Yeah. I can't imagine people swimming in that. I thought the hypothermia would be quite dangerous.
You get lots of people that do this wild swimming as well, don't you? Swimming in cold water, and I think a lot of them, if they're doing that, wear wetsuits or dry suits even, maybe. I don't know. Not that I would have thought you can swim very well in a dry suit, because they're really quite bulky, I think, aren't they? But not having worn one, I hasten to add, somebody may correct me on that, that's fine. But yeah, there's a lot of people over in this country that do the wild swimming. Chris says Coniston and Windermere are the two lakes used for water speed records. See,
wow.
We have all the information for you on here.
It's very helpful.
Yeah.
There must be a fairly long open space to be able to get that speed up. They'd need to travel in a straight line, I'd imagine. We have a place over here called Lake Eyre, and it's salt. It's all salt, but every now and then it fills up with water, and they go out and do land speed records there. I forget, one of the most famous racing drivers broke the world land speed record on Lake Eyre. I think it's in South Australia.
Yeah.
It's very strange places in outback Australia like that.
Well, these I think do tend to be quite long and narrow, because they're Chris says, when I said about him coming up with all the info, he said it's called being an anorak. They're very long and straight, which is why they were used, and that would be because they were glacial valleys. So I think I'm right in saying that. So the ice tends to flow in a straight line, more or less, doesn't it? So
right, yeah. Did they freeze over again at times in winter? Or
not here? No.
Not here. No.
I don't think they ever get anything much in the way of ice on them these days, and especially with global warming now. I think it'd be very, and certainly not to the extent of freezing over. Going back a couple of centuries or so, the River Thames used to freeze over, and people would skate on it. Well, that hasn't happened for quite a long time now, and you know, no, Chris confirms they don't freeze over these days. So I think we ought to get him on the show.
Is it used as a drinking water too? Is it like dam water thought that way, or
I'm not
just
sure if any of them are used as reservoirs or not. They may well be, but I'm not sure about that. And we do seem to get a water shortage in this country most years now in the summer. So they may be, but I couldn't really say. I have to look it up. I have to look that up, unless Chris comes up with the answer, of course.
And farming too, agriculture. I was wondering if they use it for farming.
Well, mostly around that area with the mountains and the hills, it tends to be sheep farming, as far as I remember being there. And the sheep are basically let out onto the hills there and the mountains, and then they're rounded up, you know, later in the year and brought down to the valleys and let out again in the spring, I believe. So if you're walking up there, it's very common to see sheep up on the hills there, and they're sort of suddenly you can get some quite high shrubs, and you'll see this head suddenly, oh, who's going over there? And back to their feeding again, or just moving away a little bit, just keeping a comfortable distance. But yeah, it's lovely seeing them up there. But and they do get a lot of wildlife up there, of course, which is wonderful. It's a national park, and it's protected and managed to keep it looking beautiful, and to keep the wildlife up there as well, which is really beneficial. So, and there's not that many places in the world now where you get that. Oh, Lake Thirlmere, Chris again, is used as a source of drinking water for Greater Manchester. So at least one lake is used as a reservoir. Yes. So let me just take that off the screen so we can see you again, Reese, a bit bigger. Yeah, so
I look a mess.
No, I think you're allowed to look, not that you do, but you'd be allowed to look at a mess getting up so early in the morning. I'm very impressed, very impressed. So what's happening in your poetry world, or your Australian world at the moment? Anything exciting going on?
I've been writing quite a few poems actually. I've found this new style, and it's just I've always wanted to write about a lot of things that have in my memory that I've been through in my life, and how I felt about them, and it's given me, and I've never been able to articulate them in a suitable language that seemed to suit the themes that I dreamt up, and now I can, and I've just had this big hour. I've written about 8 poems in the last couple of weeks, which is great.
Wow.
It's been really good, I am looking towards getting a book published shortly. And there'll be a launch. There'll be a few launches actually. My sister's setting all that up. My older sister.
Excellent. And don't forget to put some comments in and things afterwards. And if it's not appropriate right now, but do let me know, and we can publicize that for you as well.
Oh yeah. Once it's published, I'll definitely do that with you. That'd be great. Any sort of help will help. We're only going to do a few hundred copies, because over here they say in Australia, if you sell 500 poetry books in Australia, you're a success. It's not a poetry's. There's a fairly big poetry scene, but I don't think poetry books are a big saleable item in Australia.
I think that might be worldwide, possibly. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they're the most popular books over in this country either. In general, but which is a shame, because there's such beautiful poetry out there that some people say, "Oh, I don't do poetry," but then there's so many different styles of poetry, so many different people writing it with different content, different approaches, a whole different atmosphere to a poem from one person to another, and so on. That I'm sure if they did read some more, they would probably find at least something that they did like.
Mm.
You
I
know,
think people get a little bit intimidated by it. I think because of the way it's taught in schools.
mm,
They teach a lot of the very obscure poets, which aren't my favourite poets. Some of them are, but you know, like I try to remain as accessible as possible.
mm,
But there's always layers of meaning behind it anyway, you know. But there's nothing that would make it impossible for a person to work out what's being said. Like some of the earlier poets are just so inaccessible. I can see why people are veer
mm,
away from them. The funny thing is, people really do like to think. They just don't realise they like to. That's why they've got a
mm.
brain.
Yeah.
But thinking is hard. And, it is a difficult thing to think and work things out clearly. It takes a lot of effort and research and understanding of things to really get a clear picture. Like I majored in history at university, and I wrote hundreds of essays about different subjects, and the amount of research it was in really being able to work out and answer questions made my
Mm,
critical faculty sharpen up big time. And I realised just what a shallow level, without an education like that, we tend to live at, you know.
mm,
And thinking is hard. That's why people like to judge rather than think. Consequently, you get a lot of silly prejudices about things get in the way of real insights into things, and that's a real pity. Like over
mm,
here, we're having a big debate at the moment about Aboriginal rights in Australia. I'm very supportive of that, Aboriginal rights,
mm,
First Nation people, and some of the attitudes I find coming from my friends is just so. I find it so annoying because I've lived with them as well and really understand the issues, and they just always stop at these prejudices, block their ability to think more deeply about it. And I think
mm.
and poetry can be like that, you know, because you have to really think about some poems, and it's I think sometimes people get a bit intimidated by it. Yeah.
Mm. And maybe, as you say, they were put off originally by some of the inaccessible poetry that they were forced to read when they were at school. Maybe
Yeah,
they think
yeah.
it's all like that, so
Mm,
which obviously it's not, but maybe that didn't
mm,
help.
mm. Oh,
Mm,
and teaching literary devices like what a metaphor is and this and that before exploring the poem. They should do it the other way around. Explore the poem first and see what people come up with just from their own perceptions. And
mm,
then, you know, when a metaphor pops up, you know, start talking about that, but bring it into the conversation naturally. Don't start with the metaphor and work your way backwards into the poem.
mm.
Start with the
Well,
poem and work your way out and work it
yeah,
that way. And that's much more interesting, much more engaging. Yeah.
I think that's a good way to look at a painting as well, especially some of the
Mm,
old masters where I know they had sort of like codes so that if they included this item, it had a certain meaning for the people of the time, you know, and they would
mm,
understand that was part of the story that this painting was telling because they've got this item in a feather or a shell or whatever it might be that had
mm.
recognized meanings at the time. But I think it's a good way to look at a painting now if you're not, if you haven't majored in art history or something, to look at it
Yeah.
and see what you get from it, how you feel about it, what it says to
Mm,
you, and what questions you've got about it. And then having looked at it for yourself without preconceived ideas from somebody else, then to have that information sort of given, like, oh, the reason why they included this in those days was because of so and so, like the vanitas paintings and things like that. And where they got, say, a still life of flowers, but some things were dying, or there'd be insects
mm,
included, and to work out for yourself first what you think and feel about it, and
mm,
then compare that in the light of what the experts tell us
mm,
is the meaning behind it, which
mm.
I think it's a better way, because then you're thinking about it for yourself
Yeah.
and
Well,
making up your own mind first.
see, art really should engage the person so that they feel as though they are a part of what's being created in front of them. They
Mm,
they they need to feel as though they're a part of it. And then it becomes a lot more interesting to them because they're engaging with their own feelings and starting to read things in themselves about themselves. They're learning a bit about themselves through art. And once you do that and engage someone, they start to get much more interested. Cultivating interest is a real art. That's where a good teacher knows that and knows how to get the kids engaged. I've got a friend who teaches kids poetry, and she rebelled completely against the system of doing all the hard yards of poetry first and then looking at the poem. She's done the reverse. She's done what I was just talking about.
Yeah.
Engage the kids with the poem, how they feel and what it means to them. And then when the time's right, maybe you bring in a thing like a metaphor or an adjective and then maybe discuss that. But don't make that the central part of the topic. Make the child feel as though they are part of the work too.
And I think that also applies to music to a degree as well. I think, if you don't necessarily want to be told what the music's about and what it's, all the theory about it first. Listen to it first. Decide whether you enjoy it or whether it's not for you. But and explore it first before somebody else influences you with their views, however academic they may be or whatever. I think to hear it for yourself first without those preconceived ideas is a much better way of doing it.
And that to me is why the Beatles were so great, because they kept their lyrics quite simple. There's something, there was universal themes that everybody could relate to, just about love and their relationships and sad people like Eleanor Rigby. Everybody knows an Eleanor Rigby. And then the sound that went with it, they just got it so right. I love the Beatles. I grew up with the Beatles. And it just cracked the world open, for everyone. I mean, they were one of the greatest groups of all times, I think.
And,
marvelous.
And just sort of came out of nowhere almost, didn't they? Took the music scene by storm, completely different from just about anything else that was out there. And it still sounds fresh now.
Oh, definitely.
You can listen to it now, and well, I can, and obviously you can, and I'm sure lots of other people would agree that it's still as good as it was back then.
Yeah, that's right.
Although I'm sure that my parents may not have appreciated one holiday. We were driving down into Cornwall on holiday, and at the time, She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah was all the rage. And I think I probably sang it most of the way there.
Yes.
Not that my singing voice is very good, and not that I knew many of the words apart from She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. I could imagine that was probably extremely irritating for them and my brother. And I apologize now. But, I was quite very young at the time. And it was just something that had become an earworm for me. So, yeah.
And it's so easy to remember their lyrics too, isn't it, though?
Yes.
It's easy to slip into them so easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they've stood the test of time.
Oh, definitely. They've
Absolutely.
really made it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Reese, we're getting towards the end of our show now. I'll just tell people quickly, I've still got work in a couple of exhibitions until this weekend. One is at Horsham in West Sussex at the Drill Hall, and that's on until Saturday afternoon, 3:30. And then another exhibition at Denby's Wine Estate, which is at Dorking in Surrey, and that's on until Sunday afternoon about 3:30. So if anybody would like to visit there, there's some fantastic work from lots of artists, I think over about 350 works at Horsham, plus over 70 3D works as well. And I think it's well over 100 works at Denby's as well. Some great work to see. And I'll be at Horsham on Friday and at Denby's tomorrow afternoon if anybody's in the area. So thanks for that little plug there.
3D work sounds fascinating.
Yeah, some sculpture, some
okay, I'm with you.
things, all sorts of things. Yeah, so it's a really good exhibition. So And
Yeah.
I'll put details in the comments as well. And Reese, thank you so much for being on the show again and getting up at silly o'clock to do it as well. And I look forward to having you back very soon. And thanks everybody for watching. So,
And I'll pin the poem in the room later. Yeah.
Lovely. All right. Take care, Reese. Thanks again.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Cheers,
See you.
everyone. Bye.